but it's getting more expensive and families are being stretched. We have abundant energy, but pay more than we should for natural gas, electricity, and gasoline. The cost of housing is out of reach for many and getting worse. But Premier Ed Stelmach pretends everything's fine. He hasn't even produced a realistic plan to help Albertans. More affordable. More affordable. No plan to improve our schools. No plan to fix health care. No plan to manage our economy. Can Albertans expect progress?
There is a face to free trade and to Nafta. And that face, at least in Juarez and I think all along the border with Mexico and other parts of Latin America, that face is in anguish.
These trade agreements do not benefit poor people in Mexico.
Well, here we were at the border, where on one side of the border there are workers who are paid probably 10 times at least more than workers on the other side of the border for the same job. And of course that's why American companies and others want to cross the border so that they can pay people a non-living wage. And that's what I saw.
NAFTA has resulted in the exploitation of the Mexican worker, the loss of jobs here in this country, and the only ones who have benefited, quite frankly, are these multinational corporations which are engaged in this exploitation.
We do have a basis by which to judge the free trade agreements, and that basis is 10 years of NAFTA. And the expectations and the promises and the guarantees about what NAFTA was going to do not only for our country, but for Mexico in particular, they haven't occurred.
My visit to Mexico was an absolute eye-opener. I've shared that with my constituents and others, and they just said, why are we doing these things?
10 years ago, the people in Mexico truly thought they had a bright future ahead of them, and now their stories are devastating.
What you're really touching on is the unintended consequences of globalization and the moronic belief that while it is bad for American workers, that somehow it is good for poor people all over the world, that we are raising their standard of living. And what we saw in Mexico is clearly that is not the case.
We have seen American jobs go to Mexico. And in turn, we haven't seen the life of the Mexican worker improve. Actually, the standard of living of the average worker in Mexico has gone down.
And I had heard of the effects of NAFTA on the Mexican worker, but it wasn't until I saw it with my own eyes and actually talked to the people who are suffering this exploitation that I realized how evil this system is. It's something that we should be ashamed of. And when I say that, I indict the president. I indict.
It was for American corporations to move out of America, go across the Rio Grande and build a factory, exploit the Mexican workers, and then ship back in here to sell their products. That wasn't what we were told. We were told they are dying to buy our refrigerators. They're dying to buy our cars. They want the American dream. They want our televisions. None of that happened.
We had a CEO of a company come in, make all kinds of promises, and within 2 years, most of those workers are gone today. The company got everything they wanted from the Congress, and in fact, the workers got the shaft.
The people who are proposing these trade agreements could care less about the average American, could care less about poor people in the developing world. They're in it for one thing and one thing alone, that is to increase the profits of the company.
The race to the bottom in countries where the American corporations are going in and fighting not for the future, but fighting for this quarter so that their profit statements look good, so their numbers on Wall Street go up, so that they personally make a lot of money.
To sell NAFTA.
I can remember knowing how powerful they were and deep down really resenting it. I really. Really, really felt their power. But I knew what we were up against because I didn't have the money to get on those morning talk shows on Sunday morning as they did. I was actually denied the ability to go onto those programs and speak my piece because Archer Daniel Midland and the proponents of Nafta sponsored the time. So then I really understood for the first time as a member of Congress how powerful they really were.
And we should not barter away the livelihood of workers to the benefit of a few greedy corporations.
I can tell you the next time a CEO testifies before my committee or any committee of the Congress, I'm not going to listen to what they tell us. I'm going to look at what they have done. And the CEOs of the major corporations, in particular the manufacturing corporations in the United States today, do not have a very good track record of keeping their word. What they have a good track record at is trying to increase their profits on the backs
which is what this Bush administration is trying to do, following on what his father did when NAFTA was first negotiated.
What's ending up happening now is a move towards a two-tier system where you're going to have very much the haves and the have-nots. The people that are making all the money off of the corporations where the jobs have been sent overseas, and you're going to have the Walmart greeters, the people who have no health benefits, that are struggling every day to try and get by.
Well, what you're going to see from President Bush and from the corporate community, which dominates Capitol Hill today, a big push to pass FTAA, which will basically increase the race to the bottom.
It's obvious that many of the companies that went to Mexico because of NAFTA are now looking beyond Mexico to China and other places, pursuing cheap labor.
Now we want all of Latin America. So you're talking about dozens of nations. We're talking about China, India, all these trade accords with populations so much larger than ours. We just won't have any more jobs to give away. They'll be gone. And these very large companies will play off one country against our marketplace.
These are the people that are over on Capitol Hill with their lobbyists saying, we need more trade agreements like NAFTA, because they made a ton of money on NAFTA, and now they want to do the same thing, finding even cheaper labor in Guatemala, Chile, or wherever in South America.
We're going to have to elevate the role of workers in those trade agreements. We're going to have to consider environmental standards. We live on one planet. And so if we're going to harmonize our trade agreements in this 21st century so that all people can prosper, so that they're not living in abject poverty, so that it's not just all about the rights of capital, then we're going to have some sensible trade agreements. The ones that are on the table right now are not.
We have to develop trade policies that work for the workers of America, work for the workers of Mexico, and not just for the large corporations.
But unless people get active, become involved in the public debate over trade deals, then we could very well have future trade deals coming online that will be equally as harmful as the ones that we've had in the past.
And rather than us to rush to judgment on new expanded free trade agreements, let's take time and look at where we failed. Let's take time to look at labor agreements as part of any free trade, fair policies for industries and the farmers of Latin America, and more importantly, the environmental issues that are contributing so much to the poor health that we'll see all over the border.
We've got to insist on some international standards, an international minimum wage, standards to address both worker safety, the environment, and a number of other issues.
And we can write that into these trade agreements to make sure that human rights, workers' rights, and environmental protection are put into these agreements.
But we still do have the power. And if people get angry enough, I think the change will come.
But if people look at the House and we target seats and we go after them, we bring people in here who have the American people's best interests at heart, and we elect them. I don't think we should just depend on somebody else to do it. I think people have to take the country into their